I hope you had your seatbelt buckled for the last 30 days because, boy, it has been a bumpy ride. But finally, we've got some good news coming out for the United States and for the world. So let's jump in and talk about it. And one of the big concerns, obviously, the elephant in the room, is the global tariffs and how that is being handled. So CNN has an article out in the last few days as I record this. It's titled, Trump Says China Tariffs Will Come Down Substantially, hinting at a potential U-turn. And the quote from President Trump is 145% is very high, and it won't be that high, Trump said in the question and answer session. It won't be anywhere near that high. It'll come down substantially, but it won't be zero. Okay, what did the BBC have to say about this? The BBC's article is China tells Trump, if you want trade talks, cancel the tariffs. And in one, they say, BBC says, in one of China's strongest statements yet over the tariff war, Commerce Ministry spokesman He Yadong said the U.S. should remove all unilateral tariff measures against China if it truly wants to solve the issue. The person who tied the bell must untie it. I think the saying in the United States is, the person that rang the bell must try to unring it. Um, so to me, these are signaling that we're getting to the point where people are getting ready to sit down and talk about things. Um, Scott Bennett added that there is an opportunity for a big deal between the USA and China, and I think that's what all of our hopes are, right? What's going on now, I think most of us know is not sustainable, and the best outcome on this is something that's a win-win for everybody in the market. The BBC goes on to say that China held a roundtable on Wednesday to address the concerns of more than 80 foreign firms over the impact of U.S. tariffs on their investments in operations in China. And the statement is, it is hoped that the foreign firms will turn crisis into opportunities. And that's my hope as well, that yes, this was a rocky ride. Yes, this was in many ways an unforced error. And I'm not being political, but it did put the world in turmoil, and there's definitely a strategy to doing that. Let's go on to see what Reuters has to say. Not only are we talking about tariffs and the good news that it looks like everybody is beginning to be willing to sit down at the table, but there was also talk about potentially President Trump trying to terminate Chairman Powell from the Federal Reserve. And the article from Reuters is the dollar rebounds as the White House seeks to ease tensions over the Fed and also China trade. And the quote there, the soundbite from that article is the U.S. dollar staged a rebound against its major peers on Wednesday on hopes of de-escalating trade tensions that we talked about already. And President Donald Trump backed away from threats to fire the head of the Federal Reserve, and that's is offering relief to investors, and it's offering relief to YouTubers like myself, and I think it should be offering relief to all of us. There is good news here, and it's easy to look at a situation. I used the term an unforced error earlier, and again, this isn't a political statement, but sometimes you do need to shake up the apple cart in order to get some changes. And we've certainly shaken up the apple part. I feel like part of me has been made into applesauce, and the other part of me has been squeezed into apple cider. It has been high tensions, particularly for somebody myself that retired in the last 9 months and is really hoping that this doesn't lead to a collapse in the economy, a bad recession. It may very well lead to a recession, frankly. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know. It feels to me like we're in what I would classify as a rolling recession. So there's different pockets of the U.S. economy that even before these tariffs and some of the things we've talked about earlier, even before those were in place, there were pockets of the U.S. economy that were hurting. And you can have a rolling recession, which frankly is not a bad way as the United States fought to bring inflation down. If you can do that without triggering a recession, it's very, very hard to do that. we may have very well done that, and I think one of the ways that the government may have been able to do that is the U.S. was fortunate to go into this with a strong economy, and we may have witnessed a rolling recession through different pockets, and I'd much rather have that than a recession that's hitting all sectors, and the reason for that is if somebody were to lose their job, it's easier to find another job if all industries are not laying off at the same time. That's when it gets really hard. That's when you see people have life-changing events where, maybe they're unemployed for 2 years. So and that brings up a good point. How do we prepare? How do we protect ourselves from challenges like this? Because frankly, you and I don't have much say as to how this plays out. It could end up a recession. If it does end up a recession, hopefully it's a light recession. It's a quote unquote normal recession. Um, and it's not a deep, broad recession that could cause a lot of harm over many, many months. So my hopes is it's not a deep, painful recession, just a normal recession. But we can't control that. But what we can control is we can control how job ready we are. And I think job number one is to ask yourself and be candid. If I were to be unfortunate, if the division I'm in, if my job were to be eliminated, even though I'm doing great work, how hard would it be for me to find another job that I'm passionate about, that can pay the bills, that, has a comparable salary, hopefully even make a little bit more money that I have now. And the time to think about this is before we need to be job ready. So have a candid conversation with yourself. The other thing is, the best defense is often a good offense, which is what I'm talking about here, which um, is skilling up and asking yourself, what skills could you take on now? Could you learn now that would make yourself more employable, more valuable, both to your current company as well as potentially a new employer? And one of the things that jumps out to me is potentially artificial intelligence, and at least getting conversational and comfortable with artificial intelligence, because I think the day is rapidly approaching where that becomes like being comfortable working on a computer, being comfortable working in office software like Excel, Word, things like that. And then the other thing is oftentimes, the best defense is a good defense. And one of the best defenses that we can have is to make sure that we have runway if we need it, where we don't have to take the very next job that's offered to us, but we can wait for the right job for us. And for many of us, the way we get that runway is by having a rainy day fund, by having an emergency fund. If you're in your 30s or 40s, for many folks, this isn't financial advice, but 3 to 6 months of living expenses is generally considered to be um, the minimum that you want to have. I would argue if you're getting into your late 40s, your 50s, or your 60s, having a year of runway would be better than 3 to 6 months, just because it can take us a little bit longer to find our next job. If you found this video helpful, the YouTube algorithm says this is the next video of mine specifically for you that you should watch next. Thank you.